parts of running a business as a woman. And we know from kind of all the research we've seen that there are less women starting businesses than we would all like to see. And particularly, I think in this moment in time where we are seeing this she-cession of many women leaving the workforce and the challenges of the pandemic, I think it's particularly important to be talking about what we can all do to support female founders. So in honor of this moment in time and in honor of Women's History Month, we wanted to bring together 4 incredible female founders and an amazing journalist to hold this conversation. So really excited to be kicking this off, and wanted you all to meet your moderator. So Chloe Sorvino is Forbes food and ag writer. If you have not checked out her column, you must. She's got all the best news in CPG. She also has a LinkedIn newsletter you can subscribe to, and she is working on a book about the future of meat. So we'll be sending out information on Chloe and on all the businesses afterwards. Please, throughout the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A box. That's where we'll be answering questions. We'll leave some time at the end for that. So feel free to throw any questions in there, and we'll make sure to get to as many as possible towards the end of the conversation. So thanks everyone for joining, and excited to kick it off. I'll hand it over to you, Chloe.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me.
Looks like we just had a slight Zoom technical difficulty. Chloe, you disappeared for a moment. I think I was supposed to disappear and you disappeared.
Okay, Lisa, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. This has been a kind of a shining point in my week. Honestly, it's been a hard week. So thank you to everyone who's here right now and taking the emotional space to be here. I'm really excited to be here, and I know this is going to be a great conversation. I'm just going to quickly introduce our amazing lineup of founders and then kick them off. So Renee is the founder and CEO of Amazi Foods, on a mission to help snack on a purpose with our 100% made Ugandan snacks, committed to redistributing wealth in food systems and creating more connected supply chains. That was a mouthful, I'm sorry. Natalia is the founder and CEO of the Empowered Cookie, a female-owned and operated allergen-free cookie company obsessed with baking delicious plant-based sweet snacks to empower you through the day. Sadie is the founder and CEO of Bread Seriously, a gluten-free and allergen-free sourdough bread company in Berkeley. It's on a mission to reunite people with sourdough when they thought good bread was off the table. And then finally, we have Kai Norty, who's the founder of Kube Nice Cream, which is a Black woman-owned vegan ice cream manufactured in Oakland, California, with patented coconut equipment. Kube produces the freshest coconut cream from mature coconuts to make clean, real, and bold plant-based flavors with no coconut flavor. Kube liberates people, animals, soil, and coconut cream from systems of abuse and chemicals, and will be hiring returning citizens. Kube carries the energy of warrior goddesses from around the world who defend and restore life. Taste the beauty and power of us. Kai, I might have you read this just to make sure I pronounce all of these correctly, but
no, it's okay. Asase Ya Daruga from India, Pachamama, indigenous communities from South America, right? Oshun and Yamaya.
Amazing, thank you so much. Okay, so I want to hear you guys share your own stories about how you started your business and the inspiration behind it. Kai, do you want to kick it off?
All right, thank you everyone. Thank you, Chloe. Thanks everyone for being here. So really quick, I'm lactose intolerant. I can't have dairy. I'm also vegan, But really going back, you know, Kube is a culmination of many life experiences that I have from my interdisciplinary background in science, biotechnology, cloning cancer cells in a laboratory, sociology, working in the juvenile justice system, rehabilitative systems, and really looking at food systems. You know, I grew up in Oakland, California with a huge organic garden, vegetable and fruit garden. I understand what real food tastes like. And I understand people not having access to real high quality food. So for me, you know, my husband and I, he's my co-founder, he also has a lot of allergies. For us, it was really about creating liberation ice cream, right? That restores value and health and dignity back to people, back to ice cream enthusiasts, back to historically oppressed groups, and also really just connecting the dots throughout time, and just realizing, really realizing that people don't have access to real high quality coconut ice cream without synthetic chemicals. You know, all the stuff on this in the stores was either bland, icy, had sodium metabisulfite, a bleaching chemical that is a standard, international standard use. So for us, it was really about making our own food because that's what we did anyway, because we have allergies, we're lactose intolerant. And for us, it was about connecting healthy food systems, right, to restorative economics, because brands today have to be about people. We're about people and elevating and inspiring people, right? And so for us, I mean, again, Kube is a culmination, you know, of my interdisciplinary work experience, life experience, and realizing that Kube needs to be global. So I'm just gonna stop it there. I could go on, but you know, we're here to share the space. Thank you.
I'll jump in next. I'm Sadie. Bread Seriously, let's see, I started in 2011 and I started baking gluten-free food in 2009 when I dropped out of MIT and followed my college crush to San Francisco. And I showed up on his doorstep and he was not interested in dating me. And so I knew that he was gluten intolerant. So I decided that maybe if I could become a pretty hip gluten-free baker, that I would be more interesting. So that is what I did. And it took a couple of years to get some amazing recipes, but I found myself like really in love with the craft of gluten-free baking and particularly the craft of sourdough fermentation without using gluten-containing grains. So launched Bread Seriously in 2011. So we turned 10 this year, which is amazing and weird. And like Kai, we are all about people. And that was sort of a late evolution of the company. I would say that's within the last 2 years that my focus has shifted from the recipe development and running the finances and the day-to-day workings of the company to really focusing on the employees. So Bread Seriously's purpose is all about people. We believe in people. We have a purpose statement on our website all about people, and our customers and our employees are the people that we're talking about there. So I would say our customer service is like even better than our products. I'm really proud of that. What I'm most proud of is how we treat our employees. Bread Seriously was just named one of the 2021 best places to work in the Bay Area. So that's the thing that I'm really, excited about right now. And I'll pass over to Natalia.
Hello, I'm so honored to be in all these ladies' company. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I am in Oakland, California right now, and I'm a Bay Area third generation native. So I think being a foodie is probably in my blood. And I've obsessed with food, growing it, eating it. And I also have a raging sweet tooth, and I love nutrition and eating healthy. And so I developed food allergies in my early 20s, and I needed something that I could satisfy my sweet tooth with, and that also met all my dietary needs. So I'm gluten intolerant and dairy intolerant, and I wanted something plant-based and high fiber and low sugar, feeling very high maintenance at the time. And I couldn't find anything on the shelves that met any of those, like checked all those boxes and was delicious. Didn't taste like it had been like sitting in my glove compartment for 6 months. And I really believe in the joy of food. I grew up on it, and I want to share that with people. And I know how hard it is having food allergies and having that taken away from you. So I wanted to bring joy into healthy food and make it fun and make it sexy and make it convenient and appealing. And I am a cookie monster. And so I knew I could do better, and I got into the kitchen, and after several rounds of bird seed like cookies later, which now that I look back on was my R&D, I came out with a product that I really felt empowered people through their day. Like, I can start my day with this cookie, I can finish my workout with this cookie, feel great about it. I hate this guilt-free mentality that we have in America, and I want to make people feel 100% fantastic about the food they eat from a taste standpoint and from a nutrition standpoint. And so going on about almost 3 years, the Empowered Cookie is grown up. We have rebranded twice now, and I think committed what I think is rebranding suicide. Almost lost my company about 1.5 years ago when we changed all of our packaging. And I have learned made so many mistakes and learned a lot from it. And I also have to say that in that process, being a boss, being a woman that, we've all have had terrible bosses in our lives, and being somebody who you think, you would want to work for. And the process of being a boss is so humbling, and women really tend to be like, they look at things from a full circle and can be the boss that sees you as a whole person, not just as a number on the salary docket. So something that's not always talked about, what a great aspect it is being a boss, but it's really fulfilling, super challenging, but more fulfilling than it is hard. And so take the leap, and we'll talk more. So go ahead, Renee.
Thank you so much. I love how you ended that. Hi, I'm Renee. I am the founder and CEO of Amazi Foods. And sorry, I give you a mouthful there at the beginning, Chloe, but we're on a mission to help you snack on purpose. And what I mean by that is that we work directly with farmers groups and small businesses in Uganda to make our products from start to finish. That was inspired by me spending quite a bit of time in Uganda at first, coming from an interdisciplinary academic background. I was studying sort of how local entrepreneurship was working in Kampala specifically, which is where I had studied abroad and formed a lot of connections, and was really just in love with the chaos and the hustle and just the kindness and the slowness at the same time. It's just an amazing culture. And one thing I was really noticing there was how stand after stand after stand, you'd see these incredible organically grown fruits, and fruits that I didn't have access to in the States. I was also in the world of like a strict paleo diet, but I was more like on the plant-based side of it and was very cautious of ingredients. And so did have an eye for, what kinds of exciting flavors might be out there that are also, natural and good for you as well. And I kind of was shocked by how nobody was doing anything with them. My mind was like, this could be made into XYZ, and it could be on the shelf of Whole Foods, and we could share it with so many people. And that's when I discovered that really, even though we're focusing a lot on ethical sourcing more, or getting fair trade certifications, those things continue to create a disconnect in our supply chains, where the people at the source are still always at the source. They don't see all the steps that happen after it leaves their backyard. They have no idea that there's market access beyond what there is locally. And so as a result, there's very, very high unemployment. There's not a lot of local industry or innovation with what they're growing. And it's just a lot of value that could be in those communities that's kind of taken out and is a part of our, multi-billion natural food space over here. So my goal with Amazi was kind of to bring more of the parts of our food system to the countries from which we're sourcing. Right now we have our jackfruit chews and our plantain chips, and hoping to grow a whole lot more. Thank you.
Thank you. So you all are such intentional founders. I'd love to hear just a little bit about how you first set up your company and what intentions you put behind it, maybe from anything from supply chain to more, employment. And also maybe you could share something that has changed similarly more recently. So from the beginning and then to more recent. Sadie, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Oh gosh, that's a really good question. From the beginning, the thing that I was mostly focused on was access, like food access and inclusion, but not in the way that we talk about food access now, and not in my better understanding of food access now. It was about allergies. So I set out to create recipes that were free of the top 8 allergens, so gluten, dairy, soy, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish, and eggs. So that was my goal. It's like, I want to be able to eat this bread. I want my crush, now my husband, to be able to eat this bread. He can't eat gluten or eggs. At the time, I thought I couldn't eat dairy, but I can eat dairy, which is lovely. And I was like, well, I may as well just throw all the other common allergens on there. So that was like my goal. Those were like the guide rails I set for myself. Did not have any goals about employment. I started Bread Seriously thinking that I could use it to basically crowdfund my recipe development so that I could make bread for myself cheaply. That was like my big business goal. So I had no idea what I was doing. I learned on the fly. I was a terrible boss when I started hiring people. And so what's changed, and this has changed in the last, like since 2018, that's when I really had the aha moment that I was a terrible boss and that I should work on that. Been working very hard on my leadership and our company culture. And so now it's all about our employment practices. It's all about seeing the whole person. Natalia, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Like I'm just doing a leadership training with some of our people managers at Bread Seriously right now, and the very first lesson is all about seeing the whole person. So we have a very like individual style. We like to see the humans behind the work. We like to know how people are feeling in the workplace. We like to see people's potential and people's strengths and put them in the right positions, even if they were hired into a different position. So it's become this very organic, very very people-centered workplace where people like really love their jobs. And I really love going to work and getting to work with amazing people. And I think part of that is like taking the time to be creative and to think differently about like what success means for each person and putting them in a place where they can thrive instead of maybe some of my like learned practices from watching, businesses and movies where I thought I had to have a command and control based workplace and set people up for failure, because if I thought someone was going to fail and I set them up for failure, then I would prove myself right and I would feel good about myself. So trying to shed those bad habits, really embrace this like true leadership style that really aligns with my values. So that's what has changed.
I think something that we don't always, because we're just putting one step in front of the other when you're first starting your business, is you're doing the production mostly in-house and your hands are usually in that dough or in that batter or in that machine. And as your business grows, hopefully it gets to the place where you can outsource that. And so the style of being a boss changes from management to leadership in a sense. And so that is something, as the production moves farther and farther from us and from our hands, and we don't often see the people, we don't get to look them in the eyes of those who are making our cookies and packaging our cookies, and we don't get to see our customers anymore as much as we used to. The process of evolving as a person alongside that, now that we're not, in the kitchen being head honcho, we're more emailing people and noticing the tones we take and how the true difference between being a manager and sort of micromanaging people rather than being a leader and inspiring them to put their best foot forward, even when you have, difficulties, because through communication, there's just so much lost in translation when you can't look at them and it's easy to point blame. And so the bigger your company gets, the easier it is to feel like you want to manage people because you're worried that you're not there to control it. But really, I would say like working on your inner leader from the get-go is a great thing. Like there's amazing books. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is an amazing book. I'll put that in the post afterwards. But it's like this job is so much about inner work, and your success as a business is tied to your success as a person and self-awareness and becoming, everybody has a leader inside them, and being a boss will definitely bring that out of you if you can. So it's rewarding.
Yeah, and that really strikes a chord with me. I remember, especially in the early years, I've been working on Amazi for about 5 years now, and I think this is still very true, but especially when it's just you and you're starting, your business is you. It's a reflection of who you are. And I saw that personally for better or for worse, when things would get stalled, I realized it was because, things that I'm also habits that I have in my day-to-day life are showing up in the business, whether that's fear of decision making or whether that's moving from fear and like that stress and wanting to manage. And, I saw that. And so I think that, part of conscious business is self-awareness. It's knowing what your intention is when you're doing something. And I'll be honest, like that's not always easy. I've had to like literally remove myself for a couple days and then come back when I realize that that's not happening and I'm just being anxious. I think it's something that I think hopefully all business leaders do, but I think especially people running conscious business and, especially as it's growing and it gets easy to get kind of swept into whatever's happening. I think that that's something that I've tried really hard to keep in check. And yeah, I know we've kind of gotten off the original question, but I do think that for us too, that happened in our supply chain. Like in the beginning, I would, and I still try to, COVID has obviously changed that, but I would often go to Uganda 2 to 3 times a year to work with our partners, meet with farmers, that kind of thing. And it was a very iterative process of making sure expectations and values are aligned with people every step along the way. And unfortunately, you sometimes didn't find that out up front, and you'd have to sort of kind of find a new partner or build a new relationship or evolve the one that existed. For example, in the beginning, we partnered with another fruit production manufacturer, and we kind of knew this, but it wasn't the level of radical transparency that we really wanted, to really be able to, know when the farmers are being paid, for example, like know that things are happening in integrity. And so it did become clear that we would have to evolve to ultimately have our very, dedicated production facility as opposed to finding other people. And I think that took time. And I think that also knowing that these things take time and you're not going to get perfect the first step. That's something that I learned often. I think there are areas that we can still be improving upon, but, kind of getting started with intention and like layering on the intention as you go, and then realizing when your intention is no longer being met, and then coming back and forth to that. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Can I just add that, in Kube, we're in our 7th year. This is from research and product development starting in 2014 and becoming an LLC, in 2016. And selling to tech companies and selling to cultural events, weddings. But I really want to focus this part on the supply chain for mature coconuts has been incredibly challenging because there's not a lot of transparency in where coconuts are coming from. Remember, coconuts grow in 90 countries all over the world. And we have been getting our coconuts from different wholesalers from Mexico. But when I ask, what farms are they coming from? Nobody can tell me anything. And that's a problem. So I've been looking for organic certified manufacturers of coconuts, whether they're, selling you the mature coconuts or the shreds or the cream. And I finally found that supplier in Mexico, and I'll be able to visit later on. But I want to make this point about running a conscious business is all about restoring life, health, joy, dignity, and equity back to people, back to animals in the soil, at least for us. Right. And really, really holding stakeholders accountable, all the different stakeholders accountable in the supply chain. And it's really challenging. Like y'all, like seriously, I had to deny a whole bunch of coconuts from a supplier in Guyana, South America, right? I had a conversation about him about our values and not using glyphosate and synthetic chemicals. And I asked him, I need to know, how are you growing the coconut trees? Are you using glyphosate? What are you using? I just have to know. And he told me, yes, we're using glyphosate because we think that's economical for controlling the weeds. And I said, oh no, you can grow other ground cover crops. I know other permaculture farmers, I can engage you with them. And I said, do you realize that by you intentionally choosing to use glyphosate, you're destroying life in the soil. Once you destroy life in the soil, now you've got to buy, right, potassium, nitrogen, like you're trying to fix the soil. You're buying all these other fertilizers to put life back into the soil. So you're paying more money to put life into the soil, but you just destroyed the life, right? And not only that, I said, do you understand that you're harming your farmers now, right? There's all these lawsuit cases against Monsanto and glyphosate, right? People are getting injured, right? The chemicals of glyphosate, it doesn't restore life. And so I had to deny it. I said, this is you got to change. You got to get with the times. This is not what people want. We're here to redefine what the future looks like, and it must restore life. It must restore health. And so, I didn't put him on blast. I didn't put his company on my website or on social media. I didn't do any of that, but I had a real struggle. You have to have a real struggle with suppliers. The other thing I want to say, for some of us, we're not going to be able to hand off production to a co-packer. I have patented coconut equipment. I'm not going to hand that off to a co-packer to teach that co-packer how to make multi-millions. No, I'm going to have that myself for my company, right? A lot of co-packers are owned by men who've had access to huge amounts of capital, who've had huge amounts of access to land. We now have secured a 5,000 square feet manufacturing facility in Oakland, California, the Loom, and it's in the Embarcadero area. It will have a small retail storefront. My point is that a lot of the Kube journey has been about self-determination and collective determination, what the future looks like, really redefining locally resilient food systems that are going to need to be owned by people and BIPOC people as well. We're focusing on inclusive workforce, building the workforce and hiring formerly incarcerated folks. And I've found that a lot of co-packers don't care anything about that. And also a lot of co-packers, I'm not going to teach them my recipe that I've created. I've had business advisors actually try to steal my recipe, and they think that I should give them my recipe, and I'm smarter than that. So a lot of us are going to have to create new paths. And I just want to remind people that while 90% of Africans of the diaspora are lactose intolerant, we own 0% of vegan ice cream manufacturing on the continent of Africa. So we're talking larger than just, outsourcing coconut ice cream, because again, all the manufacturers use sodium metabisulfite. This is something I had to do a lot of research on. I called Thailand, Philippines, they all put sodium metabisulfite. It's a bleaching chemical inside of the coconut cream, which causes gastrointestinal hormonal issues. So we have to have a new way forward. And sometimes that means taking risk, right? Somebody's gonna have to be that person. And I'm saying we are that that group, that business. And so we've changed our LLC. We're in a legal conversion to become Kube PBC, Public Benefit Corporation, right? So that means we have accountability to the public with our triple bottom line of restorative economics, racial and gender equity, and ecology, and looking at our byproducts and seeing how that can go back into the soil. So we have diversity here. Some people will use a co-packer for different types of products, and some people will have to reinvent the wheel on creating healthier vegan ice cream manufacturing companies. Just sharing that.
I loved that. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is exactly what I wanted to get us all started off on. You're clearly building such intentional and conscious businesses. So I'd love to hear how each of you goes through the thought process yourself of thinking about growth and thinking about financing and thinking about funding. Because obviously, not all of you, but a lot of you are also just in the Northern California, Silicon Valley area. There's a lot of pressure for raises, the big raises, and a lot of you have taken an alternative path. I'd love to hear you talk about it.
I love discussion. Oh, Renee, do you want to go first? I feel like we have an alternative view on financing and growth that has been, I think, hard fought. I've for a long time looked to other businesses to learn, what I should be doing and how I should be growing. and following in their footsteps. And it took me a long time and a lot of courage to realize that that wasn't the right path for me and for Bread Seriously. And so I think tying it back in with our value of leadership, or my personal value of leadership, that I realized that in order to scale my company to what I thought I needed to scale it to, I would have to give up the focus on the individual human in the workplace. I cannot scale my people systems because my people systems have to be nuanced in order for people to have that dignity in the workplace. And thanks for using the word dignity, Kai. That one really resonates. So we don't have any investors right now. We've been completely debt financed, which is a very privileged position to be. And it comes with the cost of scaling very slowly. We also self-manufacture. We tried out a co-packer and it didn't work out for us. And I realized I wanted more of a say in our labor practices than I had with a co-packer. So I think that tying it all together, taking that holistic view, I know other people here have good experiences with investors, and that is encouraging to me. It is definitely something that it's a risk that I've been wary of taking. But right now, my stakeholders are my employees, not my investors. And that feels like the right match for Bread Seriously. And it means that we're going to stay a smaller company than we might otherwise be.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. We've been in business for about 5 years, and I've been very fortunate to also be mostly debt financed up until recently, as well as my dad is actually very involved in our business because he used to work. The first time I went to Uganda was actually with him when I was in middle school. He used to work in the region, and it was from a very different angle. He worked for the International Monetary Fund, which is like way up here, not really down in the weeds with what's actually happening on the ground. And I came from the other direction, and we kind of met in the middle. And so he's been helpful also on the financing front through that. But of course, as we grow, we've had to really think about what actually is our strategy that's going to keep this all sustainable, and who are we going to let in, and who is the right fit. And I will say that similar to what I was describing before, where you kind of find yourself going and going and then have to pause and think about it. Like, that's happened to me with the fundraising process, where someone comes along, they're like, oh, I really think I can bring this to the table, da da da. And then I take a moment and I'm like, well, is this person going to be interested in the long road? Is this person going to be interested in our triple bottom line? Is this person, going to be somebody that aligns with, our values and what we're doing, and is more excited about that than just like, boom, 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 let's exit in 2 years. And I think it can be very tempting, being in this crazy CPG world, to watch all these, big exits and you see it happening and you're like, oh God, are we still kicking? Are we still good? And I think just keeping myself in check there and being like, no, we actually are still good. Like, we've made it this far. We can take our time. We can make choices. That's sort of just been my thought process as we've started to bring on outside investment. And we're still at the very early stages of that, but certainly I found myself going to impact investing communities, and really trying to access more of the angel networks that might take a little bit more time, again, to sift through and figure out, but I think ultimately will land us with people who are excited to be a part of what we're doing. So that's sort of my 2 cents on that.
I have a combination of how I have bootstrapped and sought out larger capital to get this cookie off the ground and lift this heavy cookie up this steep mountain. Still pushing. And so I have done some debt financing, and I'm currently doing angel investors. And I think, friends and family rounds are always believe it or not, I bet you there's somebody in your cell phone, in your contacts, who has even 20 grand kicking around that they believe in you and they would be willing and able to risk that money on you. And I even solicited my neighbor who saw me hustling and working ungodly hours and also was diabetic and gluten-free and loved the product, and he never had kids. And I was like, I bet he has money. And I ended up asking him for $20,000. And he was like, I wish you asked earlier. And so you just don't know who you're going to get money from. And you have to have an abundance mindset that you are kicking ass. You're going to continue to do that. If you bring value to the market and you bring value to people's lives, there are people, they might even be your customers. My latest angel investor is a consumer of ours, and that's how we met. He was a fanatic for the cookies, and I was like, wow, this guy's really into it. And we went on a walk and totally hit it off, and our values absolutely align. And I can't deny that I wish he was a woman, but he totally shares the ethos that we do. And the way you think you're going to get capital might not end up looking like how you end up getting that money, but keeping an open mindset. And it is very, glamorized, and to be in the Bay Area and all these venture capital firms and your cap table and all these terminologies. And it's a lot of it is noise. Like, there's sweat equity, and that will bring you very far. But how much of your life and time and sleep do you want to sacrifice to get there? So I think having a long game mentality and just like not being turned off by the idea that investors are going to get a lot for a little. It doesn't always have to be that way. And saying no is a very powerful word, not just to investors, but to opportunities. It's all about timing. Even like with certain launches on places where I never thought we would sell well, I've been totally wrong. And that I was right about the timing, but wrong about a product market fit. Even with investors, I was turned off initially, and I did more research and opened my mind, and turned out that they were great partners, and they currently are. So I would say just be diligent, but also don't be afraid to say no. That's my sense.
Yes, can I just add in really quick that we actually we bootstrapped. That's how we started out. And then we raised funding on crowdfundmainstreet.com, which is regulation investment crowdfunding. And I had a lot of support from customers, because people are like, dang, this is the best tasting non-dairy coconut ice cream. I don't even taste coconut. I just taste bold, creamy flavors and textures. People just are still amazed. And, like, we've had VCs come to us and we weren't interested in them. And a lot of them, again, we just find that there's a lot of people who want to align their values with companies and conscious companies that also have the similar, and that our values in alignment with them. And people really want to see companies address social issues of our time with an outstanding product, right? And so for us right now, we are raising capital. We are doing a Rule 506C. So it is a public offering to any accredited investor right now. And there are quite a few people who are ready to invest. And so it's really, I'll just say this, it's really, really powerful, I think, as a woman and as a BIPOC woman, to go into any room and say, I have an investment offering for you. I have a term sheet. I have a securities attorney. And that securities attorney is like your powerful goddess, warrior woman or warrior man, like rooting you on, because you get to set the terms. And I just want to empower every single entrepreneur out there to really take the time to look up securities attorneys, because if you're in the grind of your business and you're flowing and people want your product, you can prove traction, you can show traction, right? And you're building your brand, you should be able to advocate for your brand. And you should be able to go, I love going into any room and talking to people about, oh, I invite you to invest in Kube, and here's why, and come try our product. I mean, I went to all these different business conferences way before COVID, and I would bring Kube, and people were just amazed, and people wanted to learn more. And having that term sheet, and that's why Sadie, I'm like, girl, you gotta get your own term sheet. You can have a securities attorney go over, like, do you want to do revenue-based debt? Does that work for you now? Or, does equity? And you can figure out how much equity you want to give. And there's There's no cookie cutter fit. That's what I love. See, a lot of VCs, they come to different types of businesses with a cookie cutter term sheet. That's not going to work for me. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we have to cultivate it out. And I want to say that I am now open to some VCs later on. If they are an international VC and they are about, making sure all countries in the Southern Hemisphere have access to the best tasting, most clean, non-dairy coconut ice cream. Because remember, millions of coconut trees grow all along the coast of the continent, West Africa, East Africa, South Africa, West Africa, right? And in the Caribbean. Why is there no coconut ice cream in Jamaica when there's a huge amount of tourist money there, when there's a huge amount of tourist money in Tanzania, Zanzibar, and Ghana? This is systemic racism. And this is why I'm saying I'm looking for that international VC investor who wants to create a new kind of vegan ice cream manufacturing all over the world without synthetic chemicals, and who cares about the Southern Hemisphere. I'm talking about Guyana, I'm talking about Ghana, South Africa, Zanzibar, Tanzania, Kenya. Because see, there's this perception that only the Western Hemisphere somehow deserves to have vegan ice cream. And that's not true. Everyone deserves to have it. And look where the coconuts grow, right? They grow in Black and brown countries. So we have to really rethink what is the future that we're creating. Thank you.
Kai, thank you so much for that. I'm just going to give a little 2 cents really quick about crowdfunding because I've been writing about it this week. It is a pretty big opportunity now because actually this week the SEC funding regulations changed. Now you can get non-diluted funding, which means you're not giving equity to these potential investors up to $5 million through crowdfunding platforms now, which is really huge. I mean, I think Kai, when you were doing it, it was maybe $1 million tops, which is still somewhat big. But now I think for food businesses, it's really completely, broadening out the accessibility of who can invest in these companies. And I think with food, it's really powerful. Big companies, big investors might not be able to feed the future that we want to see. But to Kai's point, if have these really, really dedicated customers, they can now become your brand ambassadors and be the first people to really be drumming up your business and really supporting you. And I think that's a huge opportunity, especially just in terms of building accessible new supply chains outside of industrial systems. So with that, we're having a great conversation, but lots more to get into. This year's been crazy, and I really want to talk about women in the workforce because you all are employers. We talked about this a little bit, but just the past year has had so many trials and tribulations, especially for women in the workplace. So what does the post-pandemic workforce for women look like to you? And what's the future that you want to see for women in the workplace?
The post-pandemic workforce for us looks, so we're actually moving our co-packer, choosing a smaller, more family-run co-packer to work with, that we can have a better, more intimate connection with them as we scale. It's also just from a practical standpoint, the less cooks in the kitchen, the more clarity you can get on production. So having, ironically, all of our cookies are mixed, scooped, baked, packaged by women. Literally, women run this. That's not just a hashtag, that's something Beyonce says. Like, women are the backbone of our food system, and we need to learn how to compensate them correctly. And so interestingly enough, the food industry is seeing more emerging brands this year and last year in 2020 than ever, because food is something that is actually, the door is open for a lot of people who have a great product to get into. So I would encourage more women who have a bangin' empanada recipe or a bangin' frosting recipe or whatever it is to think broad and be like, I could actually decide my own financial future with this company. And I do think that food specifically is more inviting to women, and there are funds that are dedicated for women that will only fund you as a female. And so taking advantage of those groups, and we'll put some of those up in the chat, One of them is Females Who Fund, and they look for small stage businesses that they see viable products and want to support you. So I mean, obviously it's equity, 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 you know, like pay me. And that's like that's the main motto. And so our business is female owned, female operated. I wish I could say it was female funded, but that is something, I mean, I only hire women. No, I love men. However, women just have, I want to support women in the workplace, but I also think the periphery vision that women have and the ability to multitask with grace is an astounding female attribute. And I want to have a female owned company. So we're going to stick to that and just drive even harder as we go forward.
For us, I think it's about, again, connecting with the individual employees and hearing their needs. We've been trying to really give people space and the empowerment to ask for what they need. Actually, ask for what you need is my 2021 New Year's resolution. So I'm trying to practice it and help other people practice it. So Natalia, I love you going to your neighbor and saying, I need $20,000. That's amazing. So asking for what people need, whether that's family leave or time to take care of their kids or time off because daycare got canceled. We're trying to provide like the Bread Seriously version of basic income for our employees. So anytime someone needs to quarantine from COVID, we're paying their wages. So just trying to make sure that people have their needs met when I have the power and the privilege to meet those needs. So I think with like the future in mind, we have basically like a map of future benefits that we'd like to be able to offer. So one of the ones that I'm trying to figure out right now is like, how do we give 0 interest loans to our employees? We launched pay advances. People can have unlimited pay advances so that people can get out of like predatory lending cycles. So looking at those benefits and what we can offer, and I wanted to say out of one of the prep calls for this session, I think Kai, you were talking about like nursing rooms. We're right now brainstorming and designing our next facility. And I made sure right after that call that we got a nursing room right onto that list, as well as a disability friendly workplace. So that's the future for us.
Okay.
Yay, Sadie, that's so awesome. I mean, yeah, there's the new the labor laws on accommodating, you know, breastfeeding mothers to be able to breastfeed their baby or pump their milk. And I once breastfed too. I once pumped milk too, although I was at home. But I've heard all these different stories where women were at work and people were busting all in there and they didn't have a sink, you know, to rinse out stuff. There's different contraptions and things you need, right? And these are just real issues. Like people shouldn't feel uncomfortable, but they do. And so this is why we have to really get back to businesses and conscious leadership, restoring life, health, right? Because when women come into the workplace, we bring other dynamics, right? We bring awareness. There's awareness that, you know, we might have milk in our breast that we actually need to go release. And that's normal. And we need to have a space for that. So this is why we were also very intentional with creating our manufacturing facility. We have a project engineer, architect who is working with us and has already designed out that space. And we're very much aware that as we build partnerships, you know, with like the Young Women's Freedom Center in San Francisco and Oakland, which is a policy organization and grassroots organization that's been around for 30 years, challenging systems of oppression that are working with young women who are coming out of the juvenile and prison industrial complex and creating 9-month programs for them on restoring their livelihoods, right? So you have your freedom, what are you gonna do with it? Restoring your life, what does that look like? And so they're getting them ready for economic opportunities, right? And so I'm building partnerships with folks who are helping to restore folks' lives, right? And so looking at some of those folks will be women who need to breastfeed and they need a place where they can feel dignified, because sometimes you can feel really uncomfortable if that workplace doesn't have a space for you. And now there should be a sink either nearby or within the room so that they can rinse out certain things, and also a little refrigerator so they can store the breast milk, or they can have somebody can bring the baby to them. And so what we see is there are cycles of life, right? And so the workforce should be accommodating those cycles of life of real people, and cycles of life, looking at your byproducts. Are there any? Can it be of value to someone else? Can it be of value to the soil? So we're looking at all those things. Yeah, excited. Thank you.
I know we're wrapping up, but I'll just add my little 2 cents on this. And we're still such a lean team. I don't have a big team to manage. I will say that our team in Uganda is the one that is growing the most, and that is what I'm most excited about, because that was the intention, that we're creating more jobs there. And I will say that it's incredible to see. Our production team is led by this badass 27-year-old named Charlotte, who went to University for Food Science there, and she never imagined that she'd be given kind of this whole facility to lead, and she manages the team. And our farmers are also 60% women as well. And I don't need to go into that, but there are so many studies that show that when the woman of the household is the one making money, especially in those economies, that has incredible spillover effect. So, I mean, that's how we're thinking about it within our supply chain, and that's all I'll say for now.
Amazing. Well, I just popped in from the Zoom magic back room because we just have a few last minutes remaining and want to make sure we get to some audience Q&A. So I know we had one question that was kind of a burning one that came in a few different angles about kind of how do you think about potentially selling to a big company like Nestle or Mars? Would it enable your product or impact to scale, or would they be less able to stick with the same values? So if anybody wants to touch on that big one.
I'm happy to say just a thought on it. I don't know that that's our goal in any way. But I think the fact that we're trying to build out the entire supply chain so that if and when somebody were to come in, they wouldn't just be buying the Amazi brand and be able to pivot and do whatever. The idea is that we're building an entirely connected supply chain. And I think that exactly for the first part of that question, that it does allow you to impact your scale incredibly. I think that the only circumstance under which that decision would be made is if I were certain that the supply chain itself could be upheld. And I don't know the answer to that. I think that's a very challenging thing to say, especially at this stage when I have no intention of doing that anytime soon. But I think that that's kind of what it would take for me to think about something like that. Not a direct answer to your question, but thoughts.
Hi, this is a really good question, because lately I find myself thinking about legacy. What is the legacy that we all, and what do I want to leave behind? And we live in capitalism right now, and we're at a tug of war for resources. And I can tell you that my legacy with Kube is about elevating the resources and shifting the resources to more Black and Brown people in the world, where those resources grow. They're in those countries, but they're not receiving access to employment opportunities in those countries. Again, vegan ice cream is not in Ghana. It's not being produced in Ghana, South Africa, or East Africa. That's a problem when there's millions of coconut trees there and people need employment, right? So if I can leverage resources and shift those resources and push Nestle to change with all the attorneys and the warrior goddesses with me, we're gonna have that struggle. I'm gonna say, oh yeah, you need to have people of color and women of color at every leadership level in the company, okay? So if I'm going to ever sell my company, best believe the resources and funding must benefit Black and Brown countries. So we're going to have that conversation and we're going to push for change because we know it takes time for change to happen. And I keep thinking of legacy, of being able to shift resources. If I stay small, I'm not going to be able to change. Yes, you can change your immediate environment. And yes, I can have profound impact locally. And I love that. And that's what I'm doing now. And I'm still growing that. But I want to have monumental change. And that means I'm going to have a tug of war. Yes, a real struggle of resources with the capitalists that own those resources. And so that's the struggle that I want to have and turn it into more of a beautiful, profound awakening for people, and to have Black and Brown people at every leadership level and women at every leadership level if I were to ever sell to Nestle. That's not happening right now.
Thank you, Kai. That is a beautiful note. We
Thank
are
you.
at time, and I know folks are starting to leave, so I want to make sure we just kind of give a thank you to everyone for joining that. This was a wonderful discussion. We went everywhere from fundraising to supply chains to breastfeeding in the workplace. It was incredible. Please, everyone keep an eye out on your email. Kuli Kuli will be sending out an email with a bunch of links and resources to all these beautiful companies. You can learn more about it. And thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Chloe, for moderating. Really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks,
Thank you all
everyone.
so much.
Thank you. Peace and blessings.